And one of the difficulties I see for a lot of the younger dancers coming up is that they're so acculturated to being observed and leaning into that observation that the concept of, no, I'm dancing because I need to dance and I'm expressing this because I want to express this. And I'm not thinking about where the camera is or where my light is. I'm not thinking about being seen. I'm in the corner in the back versus, I'm trying to be right in the middle so that everybody can see what I'm doing.
Today is Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Who are we speaking with?
You're speaking with Brian Polite of Afro Mosaic Soul, co-founder Afro Mosaic Soul, member of Ashe Dance Theater Collective, 1/3 of the Rhythm Conclave, um, and advisor to Cut the Rug Institute. And yeah, and lover of all things dance and music, specifically, house, hip hop, soul music, and the dances that are attached to all of them.
Get into it. What does soulful house mean to you? Or how would you define soulful house?
What it means and what it is are two different things. Is, um, what it is house music that is specifically designed to evoke elements of soul and R&B music from previous generations. So there's a focus on melody, on chords, on musicianship, even while still maintaining the electronic quality of dance music. But there's still, instrumental elements that can be drawn directly back to the soulful, to the disco and post-disco R&B and boogie music movements. What it means is it is my life. I mean, and I mean that in like a large portion of the people that I have met and that I know are because of my affiliations through the soulful house underground or soulful underground of New York City. Um, and it wasn't the plan. The plan was to go to art school, get a degree, and design. And not that I'm not doing that per se, but the bingo card did not include dance and anything beyond like dancing at parties, if that. And I've been able to do a lot more um, because of the relationships and that I've acquired through the soulful house community. That has literally shaped the entire arc of my adult life.
Two-part question. What is
Mm.
house dance? And is there a proper way to dance to house?
I'll answer the second question first, which is on beat. That's really it. Um, that's the closest thing to a rule that exists. And I take that from the dancers that I came up with that had attended the Loft and the Garage and other clubs like that, Ozone Layer, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that they always were big about was that the movement, in terms of club dancing in the clubs, is free movement. So that it was never really thought of as a style. So, when people now, they like to call it lofting, but the folks who were there, and they were, every one of them that I've ever asked about it was very adamant that it's not a style, and a number of them grudgingly accept the term only because it's the closest thing they have for shorthand to explain what it is that they were doing, but it's not adequate to describe it. And it's really just people from different backgrounds coming together and dancing. And it's like the parable of stone soup parable. Someone's got, trying to create a stew, but they don't have any ingredients. And they're just like, well, you know what? I'm going to make stone soup. I have a rock. I'm going to put that in there. Anybody else got anything? Oh, I got some carrots. Oh, I got some whatever. Oh, I got some celery. Well, I have some pepper. Well, I have some. Everybody kind of puts everything into the pot and it becomes the stew. And so, like, you can't have Like you can't have all these people dancing together every weekend from like the 70s into the 80s, you know, into the 90s. Like at some point there's going to be a bleed over of influence. And it's not that it's conscience, it's just what happens. Human beings being together, they create things just being in, you know, socializing with each other. You know, they create, you know, a community, and from the community, you know, they build a culture. You know, so that, but in terms of like what house dance is, what's taught as house dance now is the result of dancers, hip hop dancers from the mid and late 80s who started going to the underground clubs, the underground house clubs, um, and started combining elements and the structures that they have from hip hop with the aesthetics and flow that they were seeing from older dancers from the loft and the garage. And so the way that I conceive of it is that it's a spectrum almost, that you have like on one side, it is very hip hop in terms of its aesthetic and movement base, and then very club and free form, you know, or very loft style, um, to use that as a very, you know, loose term. Um, and then all of them sort of occupy the space in between that spectrum, depending on what they're dancing to and what their moods are. You know, if you play, you know, like if you play like Acid Crash or something like that, like they're going to be dancing hard because the song is a hard record. So it's going to lean a little bit more on the hip hop side because they're responding to like the hardness of the drum patterns and the brightness of everything. But if you play something like um, The Chase from War, which is considered like a loft classic, you know, their whole style switches because they embody that whole range. You know, like they learned from their elders in the club, and they came up with something that they were able to later like codify into a system to be able to teach. So that, and that essentially is where house dance, what house dance is. It was them taking like what they knew from hip hop and what they saw from the older dancers, the older club heads, and fusing those things together, and then figuring out how do you know, make that into set movement that you can then share with people anywhere. And why I say that, um, is because one of the senses that I got, so I came into the club scene around October of 1995. Bade Francis took me to Frank's Lounge for Ian Friday's Tea Party open mic. They had open mic at the beginning. They had a featured performer, vocalist, poet, whomever, and then and then Ian would get on and he would just play records until, you know, Frank or Terry, you know, got tired of them and was like, "Yo, we shutting the bar down. Y'all got to get out of here." Um, and so that, now I lost a whole train of thought giving the backstory. Um, but that the sense that I got from the older heads when I first was exposed to the underground was that they were thinking like, well, this is it. It's not like how it used to be, not even 3 or 4 years ago. You know, big clubs are starting to go away, except for Shelter and a few other spots. Um, Music is changing. Hip hop is taking over everything. Club music is being forced back underground. It's kind of a wrap. So the sense I got from them was that it was dying in 95. Um, and everybody was kind of figuring out like what they can do. Uh, so some people were starting parties, you know, and one of the things that a lot of the dancers affiliated with the Mop Tops were doing was that they had an opportunity in the curiosity of people that they were meeting when they were traveling to teach this. Oh, what's that other thing you do that's not hip hop? And so they figured out, well, like, how do we teach this thing that we do? And so that for them was their solution. Their solution was to, like, well, if we teach it to a new generation of people from different places, then that will keep this going. The results, depends on who you ask. Some people understand it. Some people think it's the worst thing ever. I will say that, like, nothing is perfect, but I have friends around the globe because of it. So I cannot be critical about it. When I say friends around the globe, I mean, like, literally every continent, all kinds of places, because of their decision to, codify house dance and share it.
Tell us a story about Afro Mosaic Soul. What's its history, um, and where is it now?
Okay. So Afro Mosaic Soul. So before Afro Mosaic Soul, it was just a loose conglomeration of young dancers from between the ages of 16 and maybe 22, that mostly were based out of Brooklyn. And we all kind of came into the club scene around the same time. And we'd hang out, party, crash at people's houses, party some more. I don't know how we made it through whatever colleges we were supposed to be going to. Um, so after years of doing that, and every couple of years somebody would see us out dancing together and say, like, "Hey, you guys a dance company or something?" We're like, "No, we're just friends, just hanging out." Um, through people coming and going, getting married, moving away, moving in. Sometime around the summer of 2005, like mid late summer 2005, um, DJ Spinner and DJ Spinner and J Lock had a party called Journey. It was at Club Love on West 8th and McDougal. And it was on a Thursday. And for whatever reason, almost no one was going. I blame Club Love because that was a weird little place. And I mean, it was a weird place. You go down, it's like on an offside street, a West Fourth. So it's like you turn off the main thing, over on the side, you go down these long stairs. It's dark going down the stairs. Pay your money at the booth. Then when you go in, the bar looks like it's been like it's a cave and they carved it out of a cave, but that's not the dance floor. Then you go further in and it's like this like grotto thing where like you can't see inside, but it's all these like cubby holes with carpet on the ceiling, floor, walls, everything in these little cubby holes where you could see people's like feet dangling out, but you couldn't fully see them because it was dark in there with a little weird indoor waterfall happening. And that was weird. And then you pass that, then you go into this room that's got like black light posters, floor to ceiling. This is still not the dance floor. Then you get to the dance floor. I think most people were traumatized by that point. And so it was just too much for them. But we went because we were fans of Spinner. We all started going to like some of the first Stevie Wonder tribute parties, the MJ versus Prince parties. Like those were some of the places where like we got our legs. Tea Party with Ian Friday, the Ubiquita party with Sally, Moni, and DJ Reborn. Um, so it was, but that was the space where, because it was just us in that space, we just had a whole club to ourselves most nights. And then someone asked the question again. And at this point, I think we had the right combination of people. And then we started saying, like, hey, you know what? Maybe we really should. We should really talk about this. So during the later part of the summer, we started having meetings about, well, what is it going to look like? What are we going to represent? What are we going to call ourselves? And so I think I have the paper somewhere in a stack of boxes. Um, I was just writing down all these words that everybody was throwing out. And at the time, that consisted of Jabril Kuyate, Lisa Pitts, rest in peace, Ebony Nichols, Steph Wiley, De'Ara Wright, and myself. So we were like the beginnings we were co-founders of Afro Mosaic Soul. And initially the idea was um, we knew that even though a lot of our inspiration was from dancers from the loft specifically, like we were very inspired by Louis Key. We were very inspired by Lawrence Smith Jr., rest in peace. We were very inspired by Evelyn Santos. Um, like these are folks that we like looked up to. We were very inspired by Mia Phillips. Like, and then like the only one that wasn't a loft head was Brother Fred. But we met him going to Tea Party, and he was also like deeply involved in going to shelter. But these were the folks that like we looked up to, and we're like, well, we can't call what we do lofting or loft anything because that's their era. One, we don't want no problems. Last thing you want is to show up in the club and a bunch of old heads run up on you. So um, so then when we started trying to break down, well, what is it that we do? Then the word mosaic came up. And then it was, well, it's got to be soulful because we want to be adamant about it being soulful. Okay, so Mosaic Soul. That's what we're going to call what our style is. And part of it was because there was a whole debate about whether or not we were house, particularly because at the time it was starting to get to a point where in people being taught house dance, everything was taught around the jack, the New York style of the jack. The jack in New York is not the same as the jack in Chicago, but the New York style of the jack was being taught as a foundational movement because our styles were influenced by people before that. That was never a big feature of how we danced. So then people looked at us like, well, you're not jacking, so you must not be house dancing. So are you even really house dancers? Um, so we were just like, okay, fine. So then we're not. But part of it also was like the politics of, but we're dancing to house music and we're part of an older tradition. So we forced the conversation. Jabril's the one that was like, it's got to have something about the African roots of it. And so then the solution was Afro Mosaic Soul. And that's how we came up with the name for the group. So, the style is Mosaic Soul because the idea is that you bring all the pieces from everything that's ever inspired you and you put them together, and that's what forms your style. But we are Afro Mosaic Soul because we wanted to make sure that we paid homage to the whole range. So in terms of the African root, but then also the soulful element that's part of the Black American experience as well. And that was, I think, we count the beginning of the group from like our first show, which was like at the start of October, 2005, SOBs. Um, it was a wild show. This really interesting show because it was Errol Joshua, a Haitian traditional performer, and somehow Jabril got us that gig, and none of us are Haitian. So nothing. So even though we used the house mix of one of his songs, but like even I'd only been dancing with Ashe maybe about a year or two prior. Um, but my role in Ashe was to be like the hip hop and street dance element. So even though Ashe was based in traditional Haitian movement and African movement and folkloric movement, my specialty in that was to show the connection between that and street dance. So I didn't know enough to be able to say left or right. None of us did. So we did the show and people liked it, but they were also just like, yeah, but none of this is Haitian. What is, so but that was like the first one. And then the second one we did was Afro Kinetic with Chris Annabelle not too long afterwards. So, but that is those are chaotic and wonderful times. That's what I'll say. They were chaotic and wonderful times.
Is there a Brooklyn house music sound?
Huh. Now that is fascinating. Uh, I I'm sure somebody outside of Brooklyn would probably say yes. Um, because to me, like Ian Friday's productions don't sound like DJ Spinners, which don't sound like oh man, it don't sound like a lot of people. But you know, like they like then those for myself personally, like when I think of like production, you know, house music production coming out of Brooklyn, those are my top two. I'm biased. Those are my big brothers. They're always gonna be like somewhere in like the top four easy. Um, you know, but like it's not the same as like a Boyd Jarvis production. It's not the same as with rest in peace Boyd Jarvis also. It's not the same as like Carlos Sanchez production. Rest in peace, Carlos Sanchez. Like, so it's hard for me to say that there's a particularly Brooklyn sound. Um, and also because the way that the community functions and functioned was that there was a constant cross pollination, particularly within the tri-state area, um, where people were constantly moving from one place to the other. Um, the most that I could say is that there may be a quasi New Yorkish sound, like, and that has to do with the melting pot of people who are here. And that's more of like just the separation from like say New Jersey, where like the traditions are gospel, like strong gospel traditions. So then them being in love with good vocals and hard singing makes absolute sense. And whereas in New York, it's always kind of like a mixed bag of everything. You know, you got the technology, you've got you know, the new wave electronic sound, but then you got Caribbean immigrants and Latin Caribbean immigrants and folks from the continent immigrating. And then you got the Black Americans here and the whole, you know, and then what they brought from them coming up from the South through the Great Migration. And then the Temple of New York, and then jazz, and then classical element, because Lincoln Center is right there. You know, so it's like all the, you know, it's like, you know, salsa, like all these things are always present in the New York experience. Um, I don't know. And then of course, you know, the influence of reggae. Like I don't know if there's a specifically Brooklyn sound per se. I actually just never, and mind you, there might be. I've just never conceived of it that way. Like as I've never conceived it as like, oh, this is a Brooklyn sound. Because you know, some of the records that everybody goes crazy for are not from Brooklyn. They're the ones that folks embraced, but they weren't made by someone in Brooklyn. I mean, you know, a lot of the underground classics that we dance to, like many of them were from random places around the planet or B-sides from random albums. You know, like somebody called Love is the Message, like the old school Brooklyn anthem from MFSB. But they're from Philadelphia. Like almost, you know, like almost to a man, woman, and child playing on that record. It's almost all Philadelphia musicians, recorded, arranged, mixed, probably mastered too. But you know, but part of that too is that the concept of there being a hard separation to me is a lie. The diaspora has always shown itself to be in communication with itself, always, in ways a lot of times that nobody can predict or that sometimes people are just not aware of. But we've always been in communication. And the influences go in directions that we had no clue of. Uh, Case in point, the UK with Speed Garage. Like the evolution of how they get to Speed Garage goes through like Larry Levan, Todd Edwards, and then Kevin Everett with Gabriel. But the thing is, it's still very much a UK sound. But the influence of those three steps along the way, they take the aesthetics and the concepts and then they make them their own thing. Or people talk about like hip hop being, hip hop culture being a very New York thing. It is. But the people playing on those breaks, James Brown's from Augusta, Georgia. The Meters are from New Orleans. Slide is from Oakland. Like most of the people making those breaks, and I just listed the black artists. I didn't get into like the rock artists that I could have thrown out there with breaks as well. You know, but like, but the inspiration from that sound caused people to create a new sound based on what they were inspired by. It doesn't diminish the uniqueness of what's created. It simply means that there is a line of connection between point A and point B, and that there was a dialogue that happened that allowed for this evolution of a or birth of a new approach.
Facts.
And you're just like, yeah, I thought I was talking to a dancer. All this talk about music, what the hell?
No, this is fantastic. I want you to paint a picture for us. Say my
Mm,
buddy Andreas from The Hague
mm,
is also loves and grew up with Soulful House, is
mm.
coming to New York City. Um, he's going to be here for 8 days. For someone
Okay.
that's into that sound, paint a picture of New York City right now. What are the spots?
Ooh.
Where would you go? Is it Brooklyn? Is it Manhattan? Is it both? Like, just paint a picture of the New York scene right now for our sound.
Ooh. Ooh. Um, it is still alive. It is diminished from its glory days, even from its recent glory days. Um, you know, but with that said, the underground is still underground. If your friend is looking to do something that's more big and with like a lot more flashing lights and huge things happening, um, Soul on the Horn, while not a specifically underground house party, a lot of the guest DJs and a lot of the sound is inspired by the underground. Like they've all like that party's always so like if you need something big and you want the pageantry and the costumes and things over here and flashing lights and multiple rooms and all the big warehousey vibes. Soul on the Horn is one of those like generally good time. Like you can go there and not worry, you walk away like, oh, this was kind of awesome. Um, if you need like a real, like for real underground spot, um, the parties at Now and Then right now are where like the heads are at. Um, and that's like the Brooklyn Frenzy party with Little Ray. Um, that's with Ian Friday and Libation. Um, if you need something that's got a little bit more edge to it, um, then there is Funkbox. And Funkbox, the music is soulful underground house. The overall community of it, though, is more based around street dancers. So you get a different vibe to it than you would get from, folks who've been dancing since like 83, and were at, the loft and then went to the choice afterwards. Like it's a different, it's a different vibe. But all of them have a overlap in terms of the overall music, and they occupy different spaces in the overall nightlife of New York. If you, depending on when you get here, you might be able to catch a Spirits in Motion. I'm trying to think of who else has got regular or even semi-regular parties running now. Occasionally, Troy O will have something, but the Troy O parties, that's super underground. That's something like you got to know like ahead to even know that that party's happening and that's going to be going somewhere in Brooklyn that you may not even associate with like a club, and that's where the party's at. You know, like it's not going to be gigantic venue. It'll be a decent sized venue. Um, but you know, the scene is a lot more underground than it's been. Occasionally, you might be able to catch something like a soulful DJ at nowadays. There's a couple of young heads coming up now who who they get it. It's like, of course, Muscle Cars, Donis, KT, DJ Moonbabe. Um, like DJ Zach Zodiac. Like there's a couple of young heads that they understand the music, and they're kind of they're getting the ears. Like they got the ears, they're getting their ears. They're learning about the music, they're learning how to play it and create a reaction in the crowd. But the thing that's happened is that there are very few regular weekly parties. At best, everything is monthly. So it's so much about like the luck of the draw when you show up as to what parties are available. So before we were spoiled, we had weekly parties every day of the week, 7 nights a week. You could choose like whatever you were into. You like reggae, 7 nights a week, there's a reggae party you could go to. You like techno, 7 nights a week, there's a techno party you could go to somewhere in the five boroughs. And not just somewhere, but like good parties. Same thing with Soulful House. It was somewhere you could dance almost any night of the week. That's not really the case anymore. And that's why I say like that's where the diminishment is. Not so much that the heart and soul of it is not there, but the ability to have it readily available at any moment where you may need it. Like Curve Mark just did something this Sunday past. It's a monthly party. Like I think for the summer there was one weekly party that was happening at now and then. That who was it? I'm trying to remember the name of the party now. I cannot. I'm sorry that I cannot. But that was like one of the few. So it's literally luck of the draw about what week you arrive, and then what's happening within that span of the week. Mostly the weekends. But if you find the party, like it will be an exciting time. Between the full blown spectacle of showing up at like a soul on the horn party to like the absolute emotive. Oh man, I like you get like a good underground party, like for real underground party. Man, it is because people screaming out because in their soul they feel the song. Folks feeling so free where they're just rolling on the floor together by themselves, and really embracing the catharsis. And particularly what makes the underground party special is that they're not looking to be seen. There's a thing that the garage has always said: dance like nobody's watching. And one of the difficulties I see for a lot of the younger dancers coming up is that they're so acculturated to being observed and leaning into that observation that the concept of, no, I'm dancing because I need to dance and I'm expressing this because I want to express this. And I'm not thinking about where the camera is or where my light is. I'm not thinking about being seen. I'm in the corner in the back versus, I'm trying to be right in the middle so that everybody can see what I'm doing.
I'm so glad you brought this. This is one of my biggest pet peeves.
I can't be mad at them. It's how they've been acculturated. And also we're underground. Like, don't anybody know who we are? Mess around, we almost don't exist half the time.
I remember having this conversation with Lisa Brooklyn, and
Mm,
the way she described it was perfect.
love
She said,
her.
homie. The way she described it is perfect. She said something like, they're not dancing from within. And
Mm.
I was like, ooh, so well said. So well said.
There's
So
a couple of them, but again, they're rare.
mhm.
Like they're absolutely rare. Some of my favorites, Jordan. Jordan's one of my favorites. Rare Jordan. In terms of like young cats dancing that get busy. Chris, young kid Chris, because it's in his heart. Like he's like real palpable joy. Um, like they're folks who are like just like, yeah, they do the thing. Um, and and do it from a space of no expectation of anything else attached to it. There's a number of other people that I could probably be here all day, like rattling off names, but like there's a lot of folks but the thing is, we're underground. So everybody's not underground. And I think that's one of the things that we forget sometimes. Because when we talk about like, oh, how great things were back in the days, if you say back in the days during the 80s, that's the beginnings of hip hop's ascent to dominance. We weren't a part of that necessarily. At least not recognized as part of it. Most everybody was doing the hip hop and R&B thing. There was a handful of folks doing underground clubs, but the majority of people, hip hop, R&B, maybe a little bit of reggae, we're underground. Don't nobody know about, any of this stuff. Even into the 90s, like Club Shelter, like it's underground, but everybody during the 90s is talking about like the tunnel, the new tunnel, when it went full tilt hip hop R&B, and you had to go through like metal detectors and people getting beat up by bouncers for mouthing off and whatnot. Like that's most people when they think about clubs in the 90s, they think about that. They think about what they saw in the bad boy videos from like 96, 97. That's their idea of like going out to the clubs. They'd gone to like, to Hubert Street for shelter. They wouldn't even know how to function. Like, you mean there's like drag queens over this side, Euro trash over here, black bohemians on this side, loft heads all the way in the back by the stair. Like, what is this place? And folks yelling and there's baby powder on the floor. What is this stuff? Like, people don't understand what that is. Again, we're underground. No, people don't get it. And everybody's not going to get it. But the thing is that you find the kids that do get it and you invest in them. I'm trying to find a better word than invest, only because there's a tacit capitalist connection by using that word. I'm working on it. I'll find something else. There's a thesaurus somewhere that's got the right way of phrasing it. But that's the thing, is like you pour into the young heads that are legit interested in the music, that really do want to understand the culture and the dance. And some of them, it takes them a moment to get to it, you know? And it's fine if it takes them a moment. It'll click for them eventually. And yeah, they can still do battles and then still be in the underground, because they've okay, when I'm trying to do a contest, I'm doing this. But for myself, this is where I'm at. Again, but again, it's not gonna be all of them, because not all of them are underground.
Tell us a story about shelter.
Ooh. Um, I'll say one of the first, no, the first time that I went, was Hubert Street. And Shelter was like one of, if not the first proper club that I went to. And because it was a club in the city, and it didn't register to me that it was an underground club. So I came there with like not with hard bottom shoes, but I always had a pair of Rockports, because they looked just dressy enough that you wouldn't, it's the 90s. So it's back when you used to have like dress codes at the doors. So I had like slacks on, some Rockports that were comfortable enough to dance in, but they looked like dress shoes, so I wouldn't get any static from security. Um, I was used to going to Rayands parties, Rayands loft parties in Brooklyn. So I had a backpack that had like a bottle of water, an iced tea, and a like, I don't know, like some sort of granola bar or something else stashed in there too. And then button up shirt. So I get there, and of course, the first thing is they're just like, you can't come in here with the water. Really? What? Okay. And they did the whole like, we can put it here, you can come back for it later. Which, I'll say I was young, I didn't know any better. Like if kids, if anybody ever tells you that, just consider that drink gone. It ain't staying here the rest of the night. It's gone. Just either drink the whole thing or let it go. Um, but I went, but I went through the whole thing, got in. I went early because I didn't understand about shelter being after hours. Like it just did not. Again, I'm thinking like it's a club like all the other mainstream clubs. So I came dressed like, okay, I'm trying to get in the door and dress properly for the club. Instead, I was completely overdressed for it. Um, didn't know anything about having an extra shirt. I was there like maybe just before 11 p.m. So there was almost nobody in the club. Like it was mostly empty. And but I was just happy to be there. Because I was like, I can afford to spend the money, like I think it was like 20. I think that's when they were doing the discount thing, when they used to do like the discount flyers. So it might have been like 15 or 10. Um, but I basically was like, I'm just happy I made it in. Everybody keeps telling me about this thing, but where is everybody? So I basically danced, me and like a handful of people who just happened to be there. I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't recognize anybody that I knew from any of the other parties in Brooklyn. Because up until that point, I've been going to Tea Party regularly, and then from there, I got introduced to Ray Hands and a lot of just random one-off parties in people's houses, in their basements, like just little, side clubs. Um, you know, like even though it's later, but like places kind of like 667 where it's like a bar lounge and they just move everything out the way so you can party. But like it wasn't like, oh, this is like a club. Um, but I danced, got all sweaty and everything, and then rested. Then once it started getting packed, I stopped dancing because then it's like, oh, okay, this is different. And I just kind of like walked through the crowd once it got crowded and just kind of noticed there was literally different groups of people all over. So like, like I said, like they were like a section where like it was drag queens, and I'm coming from like military household, Caribbean mother from down south. So like, because I went to high school in Virginia. My mom's from St. Thomas USVI. So like, if you needed like anything that would be like wild homophobic, like all the boxes ticked for like, and it was like, oh snap, it's mad drag queens on this part of the club, mad drag queens. Oh, these guys, oh, and then all their friends. And then this side of the club is like, okay, there's a whole bunch of black people, and then there's just one white guy in like a white blazer and t-shirt with like his date that's got like a cocktail dress on, you know, and like, glittery cocktail dress and high heels. And I'm just like, it's just mad random type of people. And then in the back corner, they had a corner that was just for the b-boys, so the breakers could just get their thing in there. So they didn't do a circle in the middle. Like I found out later, so that they wouldn't put the circle in the middle. Like, okay, y'all want to do a circle? That's the designated spot. I think they had a guy who was hired by the club to like keep the energy positive and keep it from getting out of control. Who was also a breaker. And I went there and I watched that. For I don't know how long. Um, Then I went into they had a back lounge. And I went there and chilled out. And then they were like, oh, the snacks, coffee, tea. But I don't have any money because broke college student, I only had enough money to get in the door. Didn't anticipate having to buy, any drinks or anything. And they're like, oh no, this is free. This is where I first met Mother Bird. So it's just like, oh wow, just have food and snacks for free at the party. What sort of party is this? And they had it, and so it was just like it was mind blowing. And then I started to see some of the people that I recognized from the parties around Brooklyn, but that was late. That was like I think I thought that I was going to leave, like oh I'll leave like around 4 o'clock when the party's closing. Then it goes past 4 o'clock. And it's like then it goes past 5 o'clock. And I was like, well, what time does this party finish? And then sometime around 8, I was like, I can't keep going. I'm exhausted. I need to go home and sleep. I'm burnt tired. Um, and by the time I left, I had sweated through everything that I was wearing. Shirt, sweat through, button up, sweat through, pants looked like I was thrown in a pool, and I split my slacks. So I'm on the train, and this had to have been like either like summer, spring, like late spring or summer, because I didn't have a coat. But I'm on the train and I know, and it's Sunday morning. So the old church ladies are looking at me like, what the hell is this young man on? I'm gonna pray for him. So that was my first experience. And it was really like it was nothing like how I thought it was going to be. I obviously did not ask enough questions. Um, but it stuck in my head always. One, because it was the first time there. I only went to Hubert Street like a handful of times because the cost is I was in college, so I couldn't go all the time. I couldn't be there constantly, and I couldn't afford to go there all the time because broke college student. Um, but the but being there, it was just great to just see, and I would go to watch. Like I always tell people, like I wasn't anybody, I was a nobody at Hubert Street. The only person that really recognized me was Robbie, the promoter, but only because he had gone to a couple of open mics and he'd seen me perform with Second to Last, which was a poetry group that I was a part of from about late 95 until about 2004, early 2005. So he'd seen us perform at like Brooklyn Moon Cafe, seen us perform at Tea Party. Um, so, but other than that, it's just random person showing up. And I for the most part didn't really dance that much. I really like other places I would dance and I was still kind of getting my legs, as I call it. Like I was kind of like figuring out how to transition from the hip hop freestyle that I was used to into what I was seeing folks do in the underground clubs and figuring out how does that work in my body. And so that, but a lot of, but Hubert Street, I really went and just watched a lot of times. I would go there, and dance for a little bit, and then just watch people and just watch people. Just see what people are doing on the dance floor, how they're, approaching it, what song is being played. Um, if it's something that I really, really was into, maybe I dance a little bit. But people now say that I'm a great dancer. I would say that at that moment then, I was not that. I would say that I could dance, but just meaning that I could like move to the music and be generally like in rhythm with everything. I wouldn't have said any part of it was pretty. Yeah, it wasn't really until Shelter moved to like 39th Street. By that point, I'd kind of gotten, my skills up. I'd got my courage up where okay, now I'm as soon as I hit the door, once the bag goes down, I stuff my bag behind a speaker or, somewhere on the side or whatever, and then just going full tilt until it's time to go. But that was a while later, by the time that happened.
Great story. Tell us a story about Rayands' loft parties in Brooklyn.
They were strange and wonderful. Um, this is back during the time when I used to go to parties early. Like I would go like 30 minutes to like 15 minutes after they opened. Because again, I was new. I didn't know any better. Like now, there's only a handful of parties that I'll show up to at the early side. But back then I was like, oh, it opens at 10. I'll show up at 10:15. Um, the Rayhan parties. So one of the things that I remember was that it stuck with me was that old Brooklyn um, is on Bergen Street. And it was back when that area was mostly like auto body shops. So turning down the street, like I had the instructions on how to get there because I wrote them down. Someone told me like, oh, you got it. It's on this address. Looked on the subway map trying to figure out like, okay, I can walk there from campus, but what block do I need to turn off on? Okay, I'm gonna write it down because I don't want to have a whole map out walking around. That's how you get robbed. This is like 96, 97. Um, and so I get to the block. It looks desolate. It looks like there's nobody there. And then I kind of softly hear the bass. And so I can't find what door number, what address it is because they don't have the address number on the door. What they have is a letter A in duct tape on the door. So I passed by it, like, so I'm looking for the numbers and I passed by it. Like, this can't be it. But this is what the music is. But the music sounds like some hip hop and R&B stuff. It's supposed to be house. Or at least that's how everyone explained it to me. So come to find out that Ray, in his infinite wisdom about how to maximize his profits, the first half of the night up until about 2 a.m. or so, hip hop, R&B, mainstream parties. So I'm there and I'm just basically like sitting down on the side, sort of like, again, watching. So I wasn't even really dancing much because there was some hip hop that I was still into, but I was starting to fall out of love with a lot of it. Um, so it was just watching, like, okay, folks come dressed up, and then it's the Bad Boys Greatest Hits, and it's you know early stage Jay-Z, and it's like so def stuff, and it's like all the mainstream crossover hip hop R&B stuff. And then sometimes getting towards like 1, 2 a.m., they start playing like old school music, but mainstream old school music. So like, your Michael Jackson, like it's disco, but it's Michael Jackson. Like it's soul music, but it's you know, like Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, but everybody knows it's Harold Melvin and the Blue Note record. And then around that same time, all of a sudden, all the club heads started coming in. So it'd go from like, okay, everybody's dressed up and folks got suit and ties and turtlenecks on and blazers and the style of the time, the extra medium tight t-shirts, you know, like, and it went from that to, oh, it's the club heads, the heads. So like bandanas, and they got a handkerchief, or a washcloth hanging out their back pocket for a sweat rag, t-shirts, ripped t-shirts, like on some old school garage style, with like the t-shirts with like strategically ripped to create designs, and baggy pants, or like any version of baggy pants, whether it was like oversized sweatpants, or track pants, or the army pants, like the big army cargo pants. But just like all of a sudden it became like a whole other party. And then as they started coming in, then it started to go towards more obscure disco and more underground old school dance music. And then it was just straight on. By that point, then it becomes straight on classics. Then I look at the booth. It's like, oh, that's the Kim Lightfoot. I recognize him. He's Ian's friend. Like, oh, okay, all right. Now they're here because I don't know who that other DJ was, but I heard this is where the party is, so I'm just wait for them to show up. So then, but all the heads started showing up like between like 2 and 3 in the morning, and then by like 4, it's full tilt underground house. It's weed smoke, cigarette smoke, incense, and like sweat. That's the smell. This is before the smoking ban indoors, and this is back when nobody had any issue about people smoking in spaces. So like I came home smelling like an ashtray. Is just what it was. Like wash it out of your hair. Those clothes have to be laundered because you can't wear them nowhere else. They all smell like an ashtray. Like you can't Febreze that. That's going in the wash. Um, but it was an amazing time, amazing time. Um, I got just being at Rayands, I got to see just so many amazing dancers. Even before I really fully knew them, and then the experience of being there um, was just amazing. Like one of the first times that I cried because of a record was at Rayands, and I remember the record. It was um, it was the long version, one of the long versions, the Wawanko version of the bottle from Gil Scott Heron. So it's the one that started that Wawanko got me, won't let go. With that, which was ironic because that Wawanko rhythm at that time, Masters at Work was starting to put that in almost every production that they were doing. So that was in You Can Do It Baby, from off of New Eurekan Soul. That was in their remix for Canned Heat for Jamiroquai. Like that was turning up in like everything. But like that song, I knew the song The Bottle. Um, but the music itself, this is a long version. So I didn't know there was a long version. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna dance the whole song because I love this song. Mom was a fan of Gil Scott Heron, grew up hearing The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Like, oh, I'm gonna just run the whole record. Why is the record so long? Wait, I don't know this part of the record. When did this happen in the record? And then I don't know what I was going through, but it was just something. Um, it was just something about like just I just started pushing to just like I'm gonna just get to the end of the song. I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna get to the end of the song. And then there's something in the lyrics where Gil says, um, when you feel that rhythm moving through your system, that's uhuru sasa. It means freedom now. And like I don't know, like that just out of the timing, the timbre, everything just hit, and like I was just gone. Like and the whole thing about like at the end was just like everybody needs something sometimes. Like he just kept repeating that, like everybody needs something. And like that, it spoke to something in me so deep that at some point I just couldn't dance anymore and just laid down in front of the speaker and just started sobbing. And I can't remember who it was, one of the older heads. Like I'm just sitting there just crying and hyperventilating, just flat laid out in front of the speaker. And somebody, I can't remember who it was. Somebody just looked over and he's like, "Yo, you all right, kid? No, he's fine. He'll be fine. You'll be fine." And then they spin off and go back to dancing. And I just like I don't know how much longer I was there before like I finally like collected myself and sat up. But like I had never experienced that before. And it was just like I always tell like the young heads, like the first time when the music breaks you open, you gotta understand why the old heads are the way that they are about the community and the culture. Like, because that's what we chase. Like once we feel that we feel that moment, we come back again because we're like, whatever that place was, I need to see that place again. I need to experience that place again. I need to, whatever that place was that the music took me, that DJ took me. I need to know what that is. I need to ride that wave again. And it is not saying that that doesn't happen for other street dance styles, but I feel like that is the primary, like for house, that is the primary thing. It is to transcend all bonds, the physical, emotional, like it is to transcend all of them. To go, to either go deep down or to ascend up and higher beyond high. But it's the focus of it. It's entirely the focus, and that focus is usually inward. So it doesn't have anything to do with the crowd. It doesn't have. It's really like that moment between you and the music, where it touches something deep in your spirit, and then just explodes it into like a disco ball of like radiant light. And you don't have to be a dancer to experience that. You know, but it's definitely a feature of what it means to be house and what it means to be underground to me. And you can't fake it. Like you can't fake what the music does to your spirit like that. I've seen people try. It's actually disgusting. It's I find it annoying. Yeah, there's a thing where people will try to imitate the movement. They see people feeling the music, and so they try to imitate the shapes, but it doesn't connect and it doesn't come across as authentic because there's no emotion behind it. It's just simply just it's the shape, but none of the soul.
That's so deep. That perfectly leads to my next question.
Mm.
How has the power of dance and underground house clubs transformed your life personally?
Oh man, it has taught me the importance of community. Um, it has provided me with a lot of opportunities to experience things that I would have never experienced. I had no plan. Hold on a second. Got a little emotional. Um, the My goal was to go to Pratt Institute, study animation, graduate, and do animation or design of some sort. Maybe somewhere in the midst of it, do a couple of poetry open mics and read poetry around New York City. That was the goal. That was the plan. The plan was that. Um, by being brought into second to last, um, that put me in contact with Bade Francis. Um, Bade, his cousins and him Bade was a club head, or at the time he was. Um, his cousins were also club heads. They're involved in hip hop, they're involved in house clubs, like all of it. So he knew a stupid amount of people in the clubs. So hanging around with him, I got to meet all these people. Um, the underground house community has literally given me an opportunity to see what it's like to grow old with people. Like I was exposed to it first when I was 18. In April, I'm going to be 48. So it's 30 years, something like the entirety of my adulthood. Um, and it's through all the ups and downs, through people loving each other, then hating each other, then learning to like make up and love each other again, marriages, kids, divorces, like all the stuff. People move away, people move back, people passing away, like all of it. Um, and having a steady community to experience all of that with. Um, and understanding what it means to have a community. Um, like It's something Timmy Regisford said a couple years ago at one of the shelter anniversaries. And he every once in a while he'll repeat it when he decides to talk to people because he doesn't talk much on the mic. But he says, "We're not better, just different." And so I think about that a lot in terms of like, we try, we hope that we match the ethos of the older underground, communities that go back to the 70s. So, we're trying to still match the best elements of the community that was at the loft. Was trying to match the best elements of the community that, gathered itself around the Paradise Garage, and other places, and, the community that made shelter the legend that it's become. And each party that is a baby and a child of those parties is trying to, as best as it can manage, keep those values and aesthetics alive. I'm not going to say that we always hit the mark. There's times where people are awful to each other. There's times where someone's like, yo, blah, 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 F you, da, da. I ain't ever, you know, it happens because humans be human in. So it's unavoidable, but we try. And it's provided an opportunity for me to do that, to be in a space where it's more in alignment with my values than what I was seeing in mainstream culture. Because the '90s, hip hop and R&B, very materialistic, very flashy. Um, if it wasn't materialistic, then it was, violence, but like gratuitously so, and bragging about the violence, not like violence like, oh, this is something you got to learn to not do, or this is the wrong path, don't take it, but like leaning into the insanity of it. Almost being drunk off the insanity of it. Um, and so like, the underground house scene was a space where the music that did have lyrics, mostly love songs, if not love songs, things that had, affirmations, don't ever give up. You can do it, baby. Rise above the storm. I lament that in the times that we see ourselves in now, there is not as many house producers putting out music, or songwriters writing songs within the soulful house genre that speak to what people need to hear right now. 20 years ago when over 20 years ago when the war in Iraq was about to jump off, you had Love and War from Amp Fiddler, anti-war song. I ain't down with going to war. What in the hell took us that far? You had Love Song, if I remember correctly, Nadir Shakur. I really want to write a love song, but every time I do, some other cause, snatches my pen. Like it's like all these things that spoke to what people were feeling. And then those, Fertile Grounds remix, the DJ Spinner one of Live in the Light. Like those are three songs that were all anti-war house songs. Like where is that now where people, are speaking about what folks' hopes and joys and fears and edifying them to keep going. And that's just three. I'm sure there's plenty more that I'm just aren't in my brain right now in the moment. But that the ability to have that and to be able to dance to it, to express yourself to something that's really speaking life into your body, and not like, oh, we got one positive line and then we go back to the bullshit. Oh, we got one thing that's kind of playing with having a message. It's hinting at a message somewhere in there, but we're not really going too hard. No, it's like, no, this is the message is this. And we're going to take the time with it to make sure that it's well written, well arranged, and well produced. So it's not just like some trite message just slapped together like, oh, the kids like positive stuff. Just throw some stuff out there. No, because that stuff is ridiculous too. Like, like it's like people doing like half-ass gospel songs. Like you don't want that. No, like nobody wants that. Like, give God your best. Like if you go speak on a subject matter, like really put the effort into like making it something that will transcend. There's a reason why, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes Wake Up Everybody is still getting played decades later. That still speaks to people. There's a reason why What's Going On is still considered one of the greatest albums of all time. There's a reason for that. And it's because they really put the effort in there to say something and to say it well. And, and being able to navigate adulthood with that as my base, with this community as my base, has made so many differences in so many parts of my life. Um, I've been able to travel. I had no thought process of even, let alone teaching dance, but being asked to go to someone else's country and teach. I've been blessed to be able to do that twice last year. It was an amazing experience. You know, Afro Mosaic Soul was asked to be the dancers for the Omar opera. It's an opera about Omar ibn Said, who is a Muslim scholar who was kidnapped in Senegal, in what's now Senegal, enslaved, brought to the United States, escaped, recaptured, and after being recaptured, wrote his autobiography in Arabic. And they made an opera about based on his autobiography. And that was Rihanna Giddens, formerly of the Carolina Chocolate Drops. Um, she's the one that wrote the libretto and the songs for it. Um, and Michael Abels, who also did the score for Get Out, did the arrangements. And then we got brought in due to Chris Myers and Kaneza Shaw, which like it's like some like, but to like house dancers in an opera about a Black Muslim scholar, would have never thought. That was never in my brain as like a thing that my life was going to lead to. You know, I mean, even ending up with Ashe Dance Theater Collective, Adia saw me and my friend Micah dancing at a club, and basically it was like, I'm working on a piece that involves house music, and I need club dancers for it. Up until then, I was content just being a club dancer. I had no imagination about being on anybody's stage dancing. Okay, yeah, doing a poem, yeah, maybe, doing music, sure. I'd gotten used to it by that point. But like dance, I didn't even consider myself a dancer back then. I was like, I'm not a real dancer. Real dancer is the folks at Ailey, Martha Graham, those are real dancers. What I'm doing, that's not really like, that was the way I saw it. So just even to be able to be afforded these opportunities, um, and to be what I always see is like a representative, like a diplomatic envoy. Like I get to represent my community in these spaces and then tell people like, yeah, I come from a place and from a people and from an experience. And these are the folks that I learned from. And this is how we understand ourselves. And this is where we are. And you've probably never heard of us. Part of that is by design, because being underground is kind of how folks protected themselves. The problem is that we're in an attention economy now. So power now is about the ability to draw attention. But what happens when you have an entire community that's based on not drawing attention to itself? Excuse me.
Facts. What does self-actualization mean to you in the context of house dancing?
Uh, it's the moment where you touch perfection while you're dancing to the music. I feel like that's where you get into the zone. Is a moment where like you, the movement, the music, the moment are all in alignment. There are no wrong steps. Everything flows exactly as it needs to. Nothing is in your way. And if it is in your way, it's still not in your way. You reach that space of like perfection. And it's just like everything is exactly what it needs to be. And then it ends. And then you're back in your body consciously. And then it's just like, what did I do? What happened? How did I manage to pull that off? I've never done that before. But that to me, I feel like dance in general, but specific to underground club dancing because it aims to reach that place. Like the whole point is to reach that place where everything is aligned. And in that moment, it feels like you reach your own personal perfection. And the joy that comes from that moment is indescribable. I don't know if I even have adequate words for it. And I like to think that I know stuff, but no, this is a lot. Is absolutely a lot. Um, I also think that in any artistic practice, the more that you focus on it, um, the more that you become very sure about who you are. And so maybe that's like a second level of self-actualization where you become very clear about like who you are and how you move through the world and having a community that supports like the idea. And I say the ideal. I say that the ideal in the underground is that it's supposed to be a space where people are allowed to be who they are and that there's no judgment. I will not say that that is always the case. I will say that that is the ideal. Within that ideal and within the spaces where that is actually what happens, it does allow people to feel safe to be themselves. And the more that they get in touch with that self, the more that they feel confident in letting that self be who they are at all times and in all places. And so that's more of a slower process of self actualization that also lasts longer. So there's like a temporary deep version and then like a more slower paced, long term, path to it.
Thank you for that. Can you
Welcome.
can you share a specific experience where you felt the communal power of the dance floor?
Specific experience. Man, there's so many of them. Um,
Give us more than one, that's fine.
I'm trying to think. Well, one of the first ones, strangely enough, one of the first one that comes to mind is um, when Tea Party was in, where's that place at? On Atlantic. They had moved from Frank's Lounge to Atlantic and is it Atlantic Third and like near State Street.
Was that the YMCA
The
upstairs?
YMCA. The Y, yeah, no, the YWCA.
Yeah.
Yeah, that space. And there was, like most of us there were a couple of older heads that would come through, but a lot of us that were there, like this was like our first deep introduction to like soulful house and the underground anything. So we were just like, this is some amazing new thing, and it's super Afrocentric and it's positive vibes, and so we were all about it. And it's just after the open mic, so you're already on some like, and the moon, it's like all the, and mind you, I hate that cadence, but people understand. Like it was like when the whole open mic poetry thing in New York had kind of like blossomed. So like, so like all of it was just like a super, super black moment. And I can't remember what song it was, but is something. It's like a song, but like actually, hold on. I'm trying to think if I can remember what song it was. It was some record where it was like super down tempo, like a down tempo like jazz type record that Ian put on. And because we had been watching the Loft heads, the few of them like Loft and Shelter heads that would come through to the party, we were like, okay, whenever they play stuff like this, they start sliding on the floor. We didn't know nothing about like we barely had a conception of what the Loft was. Actually, no, we had no real conception of what the Loft was. We just heard people mention it. We understood what Club Shelter was. A handful of us had managed to go there a few times, but it was like, oh, when they play stuff like this, we always see them always sliding on the floor. Okay, that must be what you do when this type of record comes on. So so Ian, drops it, and I just yell out, "Everybody slide on the floor!" And we all, I don't know why. First of all, I don't know why I said it, and I don't know why folks listen to me. But we all just like, a whole gang of us just started sliding around on the floor. And I'm sure we looked like a whole mess. I'm sure the old heads were looking at us like, yo, what are these kids? You know what? The kids is having fun. Just let them have it. Like we must have looked crazy to them. But we were just like, this must be what you do. Like the music got mad slow. You're supposed to slide around on the floor and roll all over the place. And that's what we did. Um, but that was an incredible moment. Um, and then afterwards, whenever Ian plays something like that, folks are like, B, you got to say it. B, you got to say it, right? Come on, say it. Um, so that's one. Um, and that whole thing is kind of how we developed what we called playground, and that was just us putting a name to something that already existed. As far as we knew, there wasn't any name to anything, and so we were just like, it's playground because everybody's rolling around on the floor together en masse. So like 5, 10, 12 people just kind of all spinning, rolling over and around each other all at once. And so we didn't know that there was a name for it, so we just kind of called it playground. I'm sure that somebody that was at Prince Street probably is like, nah, that's we were doing that in Prince Street, to which I will concede. More than likely, it was being done at Prince Street. Again, we didn't know anything, so we just put a name to it just so that we knew what we were referring to. But it was, but that was one of the things that allowed us to kind of develop our understanding of being on the floor like that. And then when we got our weight up a little bit, then being able to dance with some of the older dancers and be able to keep pace. Because one thing to dance with like, experienced club heads, but it's another thing to be able to dance with them and keep pace.
Say more about that. Unpack that.
All right. So you have to think about it where like there's a flow that they generate that is that like so the times when I'm asked to teach, usually one of the things I teach people is I create a space where they can partner with someone, they can dance with another person. And the thing that I always have to remind them is you're supposed to be dancing with your partner. You're not trying to outdance them. Don't lose your partner. Like, don't get so wrapped up in doing your thing that you forget that you're supposed to be connecting with somebody else and connecting with the music at the same time. So like dancing with the older shelter heads and with like the loft heads and heads from the garage, they've been doing this for like decades. And many of them have maintained their bodies where like, yeah, they're pushing mid 50s into 60s. They could still bust out a cartwheel. Some of the ladies could still do full splits, you know, and can do it comfortably, easy, like it's nothing, you know. So it's a thing where you have to be open to how they're moving, and you have to be ready because they will take what seems like a simple move, and next thing you know, they're upside down on the ground and you're still standing there because they just transitioned into slow rollover. And like you're not ready for that. Like you just kind of sitting there standing like, what do I do now? So just, like the facility with movement and with music and being able to create space with somebody else, like that is a skill that many of the older club heads have mastered, where they can dance with somebody and you don't feel crowded. You don't feel like the person's like attacking you or like impinging and you don't have any space to maneuver. It's like they know how to still be dynamic and then allow you space to do your thing and then respond to that as a conversation. That doesn't happen overnight. That is literally a skill that has to be developed and learned um, in the clubs mostly. I mean, you could try to recreate it in the class, but it's not the same. Like you can't take enough classes for it to be the same. Like you just like, and I mean in terms of like just the math of it won't math. Like a 2 hour class max, where that's not the entire class that you go to what maybe once a week, twice a week. That's not the same as I'm in the club for 6 hours minimum, 5 to 6 nights a week minimum for 10 years, 12 years, 20 years. Like that's a whole different space. You start crunching the numbers, it's like a part-time job. you know so it's like there's a reason why folks skill level has become what it's become. It's because we've been doing this deep rooted in the place where it happens, with all the trial and error that goes along with it in order to perfect the craft of it.
So well said. What challenges do newcomers face when trying to access the underground house scene?
The underground is very insular. um I was lucky because I got grandfathered in. Again, I knew Bade. Bade introduced me to everybody that he knew. um Being in the poetry scene, a couple of the other poets, like Ty, Fahim, Brad, um, they were also, in the house clubs as well. Shelly, Nicole, like so being with them, I also got to meet different people. So it wasn't like I was a newcomer, but it'd be like, oh, that's Bade's friend. I remember him. He was such and such place with this guy. Oh, he was hanging out with these people. I saw him at, so like, but if you come there by yourself and you don't get the introduction, the heads can be cold because in their mind they don't know that you plan to stay. As far as they're concerned, you're a party tourist. So why put the energy into somebody that you just here to scope out the scene and then you're gone. You're not coming back. You don't plan to stay. So why open up? You ain't staying here. You're not invested in this. What ends up happening though is that over time, if you keep going out, people start recognizing you, and then you earn the right to be recognized. And that's how I look at most traditional cultures. And I look at the underground club scene, particularly in New York, is functioning the same way. It functions like a traditional culture. You earn the right to be recognized. So you first show up, you're nobody. No one's paying you any mind. Why would they? You have no investment, no status here. You're just here. You put more time in, people start recognizing, like, oh, that's the person who is here. Oh, that's the person. Oh, I seen them. They were at such and such party. And then someplace random, like on a train platform, you'll run into somebody and they'll be like, hey, weren't you at such and such? You were at a Curvin's party, right? Yeah, I remember your face from there. Yeah, hey, how you doing? My name is. And then from there, it's almost like I tell the young heads, like the old heads are always watching and the old heads talk. And part of why I say that is because, I watched it happen where The old heads pay somebody no mind, and then all of a sudden, one of them sees somebody somewhere randomly, has a small conversation with them. Next thing you know, other folks are walking up, introducing themselves. Hey, weren't you at? Hey, I saw you. Like, oh, the word got around. Oh, this kid's cool. Oh, he's got a little something to him. He's got good energy. Hey, there's a party happening such and such. You should come through. And but the thing is, it takes a moment. Um, it takes a moment because they have to feel that you love this thing that has been their life for decades as much as they do. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it's like they care, and yeah, sometimes the older heads can be a little overbearing. Um, they can be very gatekeeperish around everything. Um, but I also get why. Like I understand why it is. Um, One of the things that I keep in mind is, excuse me, um, you're talking about a community that starts late 60s, early 70s, depending on who you ask. So like, and a large part of that community is the queer community, LGBTQI plus community is a large part of it. It's like foundational to it. So these parties and spaces where you're black, you're queer, you're poor or working class at best, and everybody's in the same boat struggling together. Like the 70s in New York, between the crime and the city being broke and the lack of services. And then you get through that. And then it's, the end of it and it's the recession. And then you get through that. And then it's AIDS and crack. And then you get through that. And it's like all the people who you've known, who you've watched, some of them not make it. Some of them make it, but they went through a hard road to come back on the other side of it. And this is your community. Like it didn't start off like nobody plans for it to be a community, but it's what it becomes because they you can't have a group of people congregating together that often for that long and it not become something. So it became something. But because there are lives involved, like one of the things I always repeat to the younger dancers is I always remind them like this is people's lives. It's not just some cool stuff to do. It's not just like a nice activity to kind of like jump in and jump out. This is people's lives. Folks were in the garage dancing for their life. Folks was in the shelter dancing for their life. Folks was at libation dancing for their life. Like at every turn of every generation, there are people who needed what the clubs gave them. Needed like if they don't get it, they will hurt themselves or somebody else. They needed it. And having the support of other people who need it for whatever various reasons they have. May not even be the same reason, but just understanding what that is. And then just being present for it, just to be present to watch people experience it and come out on the other side of it. That's a community. So you can't have someone just walks in there and be like, hey, well, I'm here now. Change it so that I'm comfortable. It doesn't work like that. It's like the house is already built, it's already furnished. You just got here. Don't put as Luce like to say, don't put my refrigerator in the living room. Keep your feet off the table. So, but in that's why heads can be protective. And as I'm getting older, I get it. I get it. I see it happening with some of my peers where like there's a number of us who were very clear about being tied to the underground. And so the whole lens that we view it from, like I never made it to the loft. or even the choice. Never made it to the garage at all. I've been to the reunion parties, which are great times, but I've never been at the places. Um, but there is a thing about being understanding that you're an inheritor of a way and taking that seriously and taking that to heart. And when you realize that like some of the people that you came in with aren't there anymore, it makes it deeper than dance. And so then it's like, well, this is a thing that this person loved. And for somebody to just kind of waltz in here and start making changes and doing whatever they feel to it disrespects their memory. And so this is why sometimes the older heads can be a little standoffish because they want to check people out. Are you really that cool? Do you really understand what it is that you're joining? Because you're joining a community. And a lot of times people don't understand it from that standpoint. And part of it is Black culture. Black culture in America gets exported everywhere as entertainment, as a novelty, as a fad. So it's never looked at as an expression of a cultural values or a cultural experience. And because of that, people don't even realize that, oh no, there's stories behind this. There's folklore, there's history, there's heart and soul. And there's a community that you are responsible to if you take up this mantle. And everybody wants the title, but nobody wants the responsibility.
Dropping science today.
I'm
Um,
in a I'm in a wild space right now, so this is
no, this
it's
this is awesome. Next question.
hmm.
How does the house dance scene differ from mainstream dance or music scenes in terms of values and atmosphere?
uh the atmosphere is very much looser. It has less to do with how you are dressed physically or how you look, um, in terms of body shapes, in terms of fashion. People dress to dance specifically. If they plan an outfit, they plan an outfit that they know they're probably going to get dirty. I need to be able to do a splits in this. I need to be able to spin. I need to be able to jump, cartwheel, whatever. Most most other club atmospheres is very much about I need to portray a look. I want to look good on Instagram. When they take pictures, I want to look, hey everybody. It's that sort of feel. Um, in terms of the difference with dance, many other street dance styles are, for most other street dance styles, the circle is prime. It is the ultimate, it is the arbiter of all things. It runs everything. Hip hop, breakers, with Vogue, um, Light Feet, like most of the other styles are designed for showcasing. Uh, so like you develop your craft to showcase it. With house in the underground, the circle, while it exists, is a temporary phenomenon and it is not as important as the party. It is never more important than the party. It it does happen, but it happens like a natural phenomenon. People are all dancing together. Somebody's really feeling the music. The other people who are dancing is like, oh hey, oh he's really into it, and then they start watching and observing and move away to give the person space to finish what they're feeling. Maybe somebody else is inspired and they jump in. But once it's done, everyone goes back to dancing. There's hugs, there's smiles, because everybody went somewhere. And then we go back to dancing. Circles close, go back to dancing. Might not be another thing like that for another 3 hours. That might be the only time that happens in the night. Or maybe people just got a little extra space on the side So it's not even really a circle. It's just, we just need a little extra room for what we do. We're here in the back corner. We're over here by the pillar. We're by the stairs. We're in the back by the speakers. But it's not about being the spotlight. It's just about having the space to be able to express what the music, inspires, and not needing an audience for that. If what happens to happen, then cool. But it's not the point. Well, most other dance styles, being observed is the point. And then the competition aspect of it is the point. For house, it's not the point. And in some cases, people will say that like it's antithetical to the whole spirit of the underground. Although, there are stories that I've heard of people like having like rivalries and small, competitions in the clubs, but it's not a thing that defined the movement. It was a part of it, but it was never the main event. It's never why people went out. And when it really started to become a thing was really at the point where folks from hip hop started coming to the house clubs, and they brought that circle energy with them. But even in doing so, it's still organic. So it opens, it closes. Then they just go back to just dancing around each other and having fun. So even there, even with like, the folks that started off in hip hop and ended up in house, they understood that the circle has its place, and that place is not in the middle. And that is a key difference. My understanding of it, that is a key difference with house. Pardon?
Can you elaborate on the concept of membership by participation in the house dance community?
Huh. Trying to think if there's anything that I didn't already say before that I could add to it. Um, I will say that, and this is outside of the class system, like going to classes for house creates a different pathway in and a different set of associations. If you're coming into it strictly from the club side of it, everything is a matter of affiliations and connections. So at the point where some usually older dancer recognizes like, okay, you got the right spirit. Hey, there's this party happening here. You know, you should come through. Or in some cases, it's even like, go to this party. If anybody asks, I sent you. You know, like I'll leave your name at the door just so you can experience it one good time. I've done that a few times actually. Um, but it's a thing where once people understand, like, oh, okay, this person seems like they're really interested in what this is. Oh, I watch them dance and they're going full tilt. Their whole heart is in it. They dance like they need this too. Again, the old heads are always watching, and the old heads talk. And when they talk, usually that means that they're deciding, like, okay, this kid seems cool. I'm gonna invest in them too. And people might give different types of advice. Somebody might be more direct and be like, hey, I see you working it out. Yo, you should try this step instead of that step. Or if you're gonna go down, do this because it's easier on your knees, or blah, blah, blah. Or let me show you this thing we used to do back in the days. Someone else might be like, hey, yo, I got this mix CD. You know what? Here you go. Here's some music so you can take with you. Someone else, it might just be just sitting with them and just telling them their life story. You know, I had was it last year? No, it was about a year and a half ago. Um, one of the young kids that I started to like let it know about the underground and bring around people and introduce. I got to introduce him to one of the older ladies that had inspired me when I started dancing. And I just made a quick, introduction, like, hey, walked away, went off, danced, talked to people, partying. By the time I came back around to check on them, they were laughing like they'd known each other for years. And like to where when I see him, he's still asking, how's she doing? Oh no, she's good. I saw her at X, Y, and Z place. Went here and she was here. All right, yo, next time you see her, tell her I say what's up. But it's a thing where like you earn the right to be recognized. And when people feel like you love this as much as they do, they will invest and put energy into you becoming a part of it and learning all the things that go along with being a part of the community. And that's the thing. That's why like it's community over everything. Because it's not, I mean, the dance is part of the highlights, but it's not just dance. It's the dance, it's the music, it's the people. And the aesthetic of it is very much a come as you are aesthetic. Because the expression mattered, not the visual. The visual, yeah, it's interesting, but we're not selling anything. And there's a streak. I feel like part of this kind of goes back to the loft on some level, but there's a streak of like anti-establishment and almost like anti-capitalism in a lot of things in the underground, where people are very leery about things that are done where it seems like the only motive is profit. Like people are very leery of that. And that's been a consistent thread for many years. So I've listened to folks talk. Like there's always this like sort of skepticism, even when it's not a lot of money involved. But just the fact that the focus is, oh, this person's trying to gain something off of this thing, but their heart's not in the right place. So why are they doing it?
100%. Let's pivot to women.
Okay.
What role do women play in the house dance scene, both historically and today?
Ooh. Historically, they're one of the pillars of everything. Um, you have Mia, Leah, Coco, Fela, both Evelyns. Um, in terms of like women, and that's not everybody, but they're just like off the top of my head, Des, um, that were just known for being incredible dancers. And again, that's not everybody. Those are just people that just like immediately off the top of my head, I can be like, oh, these women, and that's just one generation. You know, then of course you have Marjorie Smart, rest in peace. You've got Kim Holmes, you've got Christina Walker, you've got Yejide, um, like so many, and that again, a handful of names from one point in time. uh, and then you have, afterwards, then you've got like the ladies of Mawu. You have, Lisa. Like it's going to be a moment before I can even really deal with the loss of Lisa going. But like, Lisa, um, you've got, before her, you got Denise, you got Ruthie. Like Lisa was an inheritor of a particular type of flow that was something that was cultivated from like the women from like the loft and the shelter. Um, and she was an inheritor of that type of flow. And it's something that you don't see many women learning how. One is that there's nobody really teaching it because you can't really break it down for a class. You have to be in the underground. You have to dance with certain people. And in order for you to dance with them, you have to be in a space where you're open to what they're giving you. And you have to be in a space where they even feel like dancing with you, to even share that with you. Like it's a and like that, like that particular underground flow that like women in the shelter have, like Shannon, she has that sort of flow. Like you don't, like there's nobody else really picking that up. But it's essential. A lot of the young women that you see dancing now, most of them are branches off of Marjorie, or they're branches off, a couple of them are branches off of Kim Holmes. Um, but it's not the same. And their styles are like solid, and you can see the influence around. And then, of course, because of the dance sport of the battle scene, there's a lot of women where their initial teachers are all men. And so their foundations are learning house movement from a very masculine space, and then having to go back and reconnect with their femininity to then infuse it. Like, so it's kind of like a Sankofa thing. They got to go back and retrieve this thing in order to go forward. But but that underground flow is absolutely beautiful to watch. Absolutely beautiful to watch. But you know, the practitioners of it, there's nobody really that's like an inheritor of it, or that is really like picking up those messages and willing to go deep to actually like acquire, that whole aesthetic and understanding. And not to be morbid about it, but like, we're all getting older. I started when I was 18. It didn't have any grays. Now, it's a whole bunch of them on my face. So it's like, we're getting older, and there's certain parts of the old ways that are slowly starting to diminish and disappear. It was funny because one of the reasons why we even formed Afro Mosaic Soul was specifically to push forward the best aspects of the underground culture, and to be able to show people, before house dance as you know it, there were other approaches to club dance. And it doesn't negate the importance of house dance, because it is important. There's a reason why it's in multiple countries around the planet. Like, it's important. Um, but it's also not the only narrative involved. And the thing is, most of the people who are responsible for codifying it, they're very clear about that. They know that. They're under no illusions around it. You're never going to hear them talk crazy about it. The folks that have come after them, 2 times removed, some of them aren't as clear on what that is and what it means. In some cases, it's not their fault. They could have come to New York, but if they don't go to certain parties, they'll never understand, like, oh, well, I went to this party. It's like, yeah, but that party's not the underground. Like, it's like, yeah, but I went to this thing here. It's like, yeah, but that's not the underground either. But they played house music. Yes, they did. I was there for it. It was great. Not the underground. It's like, because the underground is like, no, this place, middle of nowhere, Bushwick, show up at 4 or 5 a.m. Like, you get on the block, you think that there's nothing there until you see somebody walk out and you hear the music come out the door. And you get there and it's full of people dancing and sweating, and baby powders all over the floor. And they got snacks, on the side, and tea on the side, if you need a little pick me up, and fruit in a bowl, if you want to grab an orange or a banana. Like, that's the underground. It's like 6 a.m. and they're playing, I don't know, say a prayer for two or something like that, like that sort of deal. Like, that's the underground. And, where they're playing stuff that links to before house had the name house, before they were even calling it club in New York. And again, it's a different understanding and approach to it, and a different connection to it. I have no idea if I answered the question or not.
You did perfectly.
Okay, thank you.
Next question. What's the most misconceived notion about house dance that you'd like to correct?
Um, ooh. I'm going to start with one of my favorite ones. If you're not jacking, it's not house. I've never believed that. I've never subscribed to that. Um, but people needed shorthand, so they use the shorthand and then they kind of blow that up because it's all they've got access to, and they kind of make these hard declarative statements because they don't have access to more information to know better. And in some cases, the ignorance is beneficial to them. Like they need to keep it in a narrow box because it affords them a certain level of influence by keeping it narrowed. If you widen it too much, then it dilutes their ability to feel like they're singular. But I think that is that. I think one of the misconceptions is that as much as I love the song, there is not only house music. Because the tradition in the underground, and this is why, Kai for Kitchener mentions like talking about like underground dance music, why he uses that term, because the history of the community predates even the term disco being invented. Like even if you take a conservative date and say that okay, it starts with the loft, because there are some people that believe it goes back further. But even conservatively, we started with the loft. That's still like over 50 years of music. That's like 55 years of music. Some of it that still shows up in some of the parties. And it's before the term disco existed, before the term house existed, before the term boogie existed or was created after the fact to describe something that nobody had a name for. It's before all of that. And the way the DJs played reflected that. They just played interesting and good music for people to dance to. Yes, a lot of it eventually became disco. Yes, a lot of it was, cribbed from house, but the core and beginning of it, everything from like R&B and jazz and gospel and funk and soul and everything in between. And if you look, if the list of, hold on, sorry, uh, batteries did a thing. But if you look at like if the list of music that was played at the garage is to be believed, and the people who are there who say that that's exactly what Larry played is to be believed, there was also hip hop. There was also rock music, in the mix. I mean, what was the song? Talking Heads. I never listened to Talking Heads outside of the mainstream stuff until I got into the underground and then discovered all these amazing records that I was dancing to. And no, excuse me, had no clue that they existed. Yeah, everybody, it's something going around because like I started coughing this afternoon and I'm not pleased with it. But these things, like, you know, there was one record, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Woodstock. That's like my favorite song for them. And what led me to that song was being on the boardwalk of Coney Island, um, when it was, I believe it was Purnell, when Purnell was playing. And he dropped that song. And some people were like, what is this? And the other folks were like, oh my God, this is the joint. But then when you listen to the lyrics of it, yeah, this would have been a lost record. I could see David putting this on and folks getting it. It's called Woodstock. The chorus is, we are stardust, we are golden. Like it's like, yeah, I get it. This is it's because the value of what it's talking about, the energy that it's putting out there is like a love letter to what they represent. It's like so, and that's not a club record at any stretch of the imagination. But neither was Lucky in Love. When Larry played it, like that's nobody thought of that as a club record. Mick Jagger, but you put that on in the garage reunion, the whole place goes bananas. So one of the misconceptions is, and I also feel like that that wide range of music being played and being danced to is why dancers up until up until the early 2000s, I feel like that's why the dancers from that period and back, why their styles are what they become, is because they were exposed to multiple type of music genres and being able to create a personalized dance style that could function on all of them, versus somebody learning something and they learn it in a very flattened sense. Um, so like one example is there used to be this place um, that this young woman Robin used to run called the Spot Dance Center on Canal Street back in like 2016, 15 or so. Um, my God, it's been that long. Um, but we had a weekly class there, and then they'd have other like legends and house come and either teach regular classes or sometimes do one-offs. There was one class that Brian Green had taught, and at the end of it, he was talking to the people who took the class. I had missed the whole thing. I got there late, so I missed everything. But I was there for him, just talk. He was just talking to folks. It wasn't like something formal. He was talking to them. He was like, "Yeah, all the stuff that I'm showing you, this isn't even the music that all those steps were made to. That's a newer house sound. The stuff." And then he went, on his iPod and pulled up some like Robert Owens, like late '80s house stuff, like old, like some of the old Chicago stuff. It's like this was the sound. It's like this more down tempo, it's more sparse. Like it has a whole different feel. And the thing is that history of it, because we grew up in the clubs having such a range of music to dance to, it allowed for us to stretch our imagination as dancers. But when people are fed like a limited diet of music, it shows in their movement, because then they're just kind of doing the same things over and over again. They don't go to the clubs enough to explore how far they can take their movement. All the music they listen to is of like one subgenre, not even one genre, one subgenre of electronic music. So there's no like stretching the experience to find something else, because you're dancing to a jazz record that's, on a 7/4 time signature and is, barely above 100 BPMs. Like that'll make you open up. Now you have to, like, when that something like that gets played, you have to open up. You can't just go through mechanically. You have to open yourself to what the music is giving you, and submit to it. And a lot of times people submitting to the music is not why a lot of people start dancing nowadays. That's not what drew them to the dance. What drew them to the dance is it looks good, it looks flashy, the looks on the faces of everybody observing this person. I want that for myself. If I do this thing, that I have a thing that I can belong to, and I can be somebody in this thing that I belong to. And that is a very different mentality. Many of us, when we were introduced to or we found the underground, we weren't looking to be a part of anything. That was not what was on our mind. It is not what had us coming back. We weren't looking to be anybody in anything. We were strictly going because of the music. The music was everything. And because we followed the music, we got to know people and become somebody. But it was always the music first. Those of us that spent time and put energy into, developing our movement, the reason to do it wasn't because wait till they see what I can do. It was because there's this song that in my head I can see myself doing this thing to it. And I'm going to figure out how I can do this thing when I hear this song again. So the next time it happens, I'm ready. Like that's what, like it was the connection with the music was the prime mover for everything. It was the root of everything going. And everything else was a byproduct. Everything else was a byproduct. Now people approach it from that. I'm trying to get known. I'm trying to make a name for myself. I want to teach classes. But like this is their path being a year or two in. And this is not the sort of like unless you're a prodigy, can you really have a deep rooted understanding of what all of this entails? And then really to be serious about it, to just take it even further, what dance culture, African, European, anywhere, would say that you are ready to teach a thing after only 2 years? They would never allow that in ballet. They'd be highly skeptical of that in modern or contemporary. You've only been doing this 2 years? There's no way you're ready to teach. Maybe children, not adults. Like but it's Black American stuff. Folks lower the bar because they don't really realize that there's a bar involved. The bar is not something that they grasp as being important. So yeah, sure. We need a hip hop class. And slide you right in there. Oh, we want someone to teach house. Sure, whatever. Like it's like that's madness. But that's also one of the it's one of the problems of commodification. And and like that genie's been out of the bag. Like there's no way it's going back in. I've had to make my peace with it because it's just like you can't be like, oh, what's that? It's what it is. It's what it is, and it's what's happening. I don't agree with it, but I also understand that for some people, this is what it's become. And then you really just have to hope that those people who, after 2 years, are teaching a class treat it the same way that people who are learning, various traditional African and like Afro Caribbean styles do, which is whenever there's a master teacher somewhere in their town, they show up because they know that they still have much to learn. And so, you would hope that they at least do that solid, that they realize like, okay, I'm able to teach this class because they've offered me the opportunity and I'm going to take it. However, I know that I need to learn. So if somebody is doing this thing here, oh, they brought in this person, from Port-au-Prince and he's teaching traditional Haitian, I'm gonna go and learn because yeah, I've been teaching, but I still need to, get more in-depth information. And it's the same thing with house. Like I don't I look at all street dance styles the same way that I look at folkloric African diasporic movement. The exact same way, because that's what it is. It's the movement of the folks. They've got their own, like every style has its own legends, its own folklore around its origin story, its own ideas around what constitutes good and bad, why certain music over certain other music. Same thing. It's just that we have a front row seat watching it develop. We're here now to be able to see the traditions become established, which is marvelous. That I look at as a blessing to be able to sit there and be like, oh wow. And even not being a participant in some of the styles, but just being around to just kind of watch as these young men and women figure out, okay, this is, for example, this is light feet. Okay, well, what is light feet? What is it going to become? All right, what is it that's important to keep from the folks that came before us that started this? What is it that's not that important and we can push that to the side or do without it? And they're navigating this step at a time. And it's not a pretty process all the time. It can get chaotic. Have you ever seen young people go back and forth on it, on an Instagram timeline or on Facebook, it can get really interesting. But they're figuring the culture out. They're figuring the community out. They care about their community the same way that I care about mine. And they're working out the kinks. And to be fair, house as we understand it is still relatively young also. So we're working out the kinks too. Like what is it going to look like when the last garage or original loft head is gone? When there's nobody who was there to be able to point to in the clubs? What is that going to look like? Will it even be able to survive that? Will it carry on beyond that, or will it all die? And then what will that look like? What will that look like in a house world where like it's spread around the planet? So you got folks in Taiwan and Japan and Czech Republic and Amsterdam and France and Russia and Ukraine and Sweden and all over the United States, New Mexico, everywhere in California, Florida, Atlanta, like, because a lot of the movement at the beginning was based in New York. But now it's all over the planet. How long before they start putting their own spin on it, if it hasn't already happened, which I believe it has? What happens when like the folks who started as teenagers are now pushing 50? Are you really going to say that they're new when they started when they were 15 and now they're 50? Like these are questions to be asked. And the answers, I expect the answers to be contentious. I don't have answers. I just have what I like to believe are interesting questions that we should ask ourselves.
Which leads me to my last question. What advice do you have for the next generation?
Find the right old people. Best advice I can give any young dancer: if you made it this far, because I run my mouth, so if you had the stamina, you made it to the end. Find the right old person. Find the right mentor. Um, because that will make all the difference in terms of the understanding about what it means to be a clubhead. It'll make all the difference. And some of them are in your town, in your city, in your country. Some of them you may end up having to travel for. Some people you'll run into and they're the worst person for you. And when you feel that, you're under no obligation to stay around them. Find the right old person and ask them all the questions. The right old person will be gracious with the questions that you ask. They will answer them as honestly as they can. And if they can't answer them, they will try to figure out who they can send you to find the right answers. And not only that, they will be like, use my name. Tell them I sent you. Tell them that I said to come find you. And I say that because I'm starting to experience that now. And it is surreal. It is absolutely surreal being in that space where you're like a proto elder. Like it's hard for me to imagine myself as an elder when like, you know, my elders are still around. There's still Kendall is still in the clubs going haywire, spins, floor moves after hip surgery. He's still getting busy. You know, you know, Tyrone Francis is still DJing. Ian is still DJing and making music. Like Evelyn is still out at parties. She's in her mid 70s now. Like, so it's wild to hear people start referring to myself and a few of the folks older than myself as elders when the people that we came in admiring are still out there and still vital. But there's also a thing about understanding that you have to be prepared for the changes that come. That at some point it will be our turn to be the old heads. And then for some of the young folks, they don't see some of the older heads that were at the loft in the garage. They see us that were at, 667 and Brooklyn Mecca and Libation, you know, and Guernica, the Ubiquita parties, like an Afro Kinetic. Like they see the folks from there. We're what they see in the clubs. So our back in the days are going to reflect that. And they're still searching. So I would say, like, if you're a young person and you're trying to like that, and also the internet works. Like, not for nothing, but it's not like, and then I'm gonna try to shut myself up. But back when Google Video was a thing, I did a search for house dance and house history. Initially, the only thing that we could find, any of us could find, was a grainy copy of Pump Up the Volume, a low res copy of House of Trey, but just the house portion. And that was it. There was no information anywhere. Now you can find stuff from house dancers and their experiences from all over the planet. You want to know about house in Japan? There's a whole gang of whole gang of folks that have been dancing house for like 20, 30 years now in Japan that you can hear their whole story, particularly if you know Japanese, it'll help. Same thing in Europe. You want to know about the loft and garage? There's so many documentaries, mini docs. People have been posting stuff that claims to be David Mancuso sets from Prince Street from 1981 and 1982. Like, you can find all the stuff now that we could never. You know how long? Like, all the stuff that I've rattled off is from like years of patiently sitting and waiting for the old heads to start divulging the history. Long train rides, being invited out to eat after a night clubbing, and just sitting quietly while they talk about their experiences in various clubs. Now you can, like, you can Google most of that stuff. And that's not to say that that means that you're learning per se, but what that means is now you have better questions. So that when you do make the pilgrimage to New York and you get introduced to somebody who was there physically, now you can ask better questions. So those are the two things. Those are the two main things. Find the right old person that will mentor you. Um, and Google is your friend. Like, there's so much information you can find now. Like, so much. I mean, hell, yep, hold on. Like the last week of the Paradise Garage, you can find that online. Like raw video footage out there floating with a little timestamp on it and everything. I'm sure there's more of it floating around somewhere, but I'm not going to blow up this spot because there's also a habit of that stuff disappearing. But you got so many documentaries now. So many documentaries. You've got Maestro, you've got Pump Up the Volume, you've got Paris is Burning, you've got How Do I Look? Disco's Revenge that just came out last year, end of last year. There's a new disco documentary. Like, you've got all of these things, and that's just the ones that are New York centric. We haven't gotten to the ones that talk about Chicago or Detroit. God gave them drum machines. Like, there is so much stuff out there that you have access to as a young dancer. You just actually have to care. Really, like, how badly do you want it? It's easier than ever. There was a thing that Danielle Polanco had posted on Instagram in her stories. And she was just like, yeah, y'all new kids bragging about how you can know all this stuff and you got stuff. It was like, you got the internet now. You got access to it. Back in the days, like, we didn't have access. We could just look stuff up. We had to go to the place, find the person, and hope that they even paid us any mind, and grind for it and dig and put the work in to even get access to it. Now you just type a couple of letters in and it's right in front of you. You're not that special. And I understand the sentiment. It's like, this is people's lives. So if you're just doing it just to have something to do, like, do something else. There are other things that will make you more money and make you more famous. Like, don't do this thinking like you gotta, like, again, no one's driving a Bentley off of this. Ain't no one got a Phantom with house dance. Like, just, like, there's other styles, particularly in the United States. There's other styles that are much more lucrative. You could do choreo hip hop and be able to get yourself a house. You know, you can be a breaker and at least get a sponsorship. But like, that's not house was never, I don't know if it was ever designed for that. And it's not why we do it, and it's not why we persist. And in the times that we are living in now, with all the chaos that is stirring constantly, I think it's going to be basically for house heads, and particularly the DJs and producers and event producers and promoters. Now is the time. Now is the time when a lot of people are going to need this stuff the most. When things are most uncertain, that's when people are going to need it the most. And now I will be quiet because the battery on this device is ticking slowly towards being empty. And I've been running my mouth for like 2.5 hours.
Perfect. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. If people want to book Afro Mosaic Soul, should they go to your Instagram?
Go to our Instagram. We are trying to check it more often. This last couple of days has been real wild. So we are still figuring out what the collective statement is going to be. I don't know. There's certain things where it's so tragic that trying to say anything just feels dumb. Like, it feels trite, and like it didn't feel like it's not enough to express how people feel. But something has to be said. But we are on Instagram, Afro Mosaic Soul, or Gmail, afromosaic@gmail.com. But yeah, and we also have a Facebook page. And again, because of where we are as a group, we have always kept day jobs. And the reason why we do a performance is always about whether or not, one, people are available, and two, is it in alignment with what our values are? Because we don't have to do this for the money. We're not interested in the notoriety. It's very much a matter about, like, what does this represent? And are we in alignment with what this represents?
Thank you so much. I feel like at some point we need to do a part two. I feel like I just scratched the surface. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, brother. Great to reconnect after so many years.
Thank you. And I'm happy that I got to be a part of this whole series. Like, this is super awesome on so many levels. And also, just in terms of, like, right now, this is the right now, right now. Like, this is what, this is right now. Again, rest in peace to Lisa Pitts. Rest in peace to a lot of people. Rest in peace to Ruthie, to Kevin Selby, to Melvin Moore, to Danny Cowboy. I mean, the list just goes on so long. So many people in the last couple of years. Lawrence, Marjorie, Ray, even going back to Rashid back in the days. It was like the first club head that passed away, and he wasn't that much older than me. Just like everybody, like, just all the people that we've lost, like, we have to keep this alive, if for no other reason than for their spirits, if not for our own. And there are folks coming up. It may not be a lot, but there are people who need this. And how terrible would it be for this to disappear and it not be there for them the way it's been there for us?
Exactly. Exactly. Cool, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Blessings.
You as well.
Peace.